Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the Ayer Select Board and the Ayer Finance Committee for the fiscal year 2022 Budget Public Forum. This is for Wednesday, January 27th, 2021. The open session remote participation due to ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Baker issued an emergency order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be broadcast live on Channel 8 and on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by following the call-in information on the bottom of the live broadcast screen. For the Zoom meeting information relating to remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, the Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, or Cindy Knox, the IT Director, at cknox@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8252 prior to the meeting. The first order of business, call this meeting to order for the Ayer Select Board at 6:02 p.m.
Sean, I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order at the same time on the same day in joint session with the Select Board. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Pat. So first, I'd like to introduce the board members for the two committees. That for the Ayer Select Board, there's myself, there's board member Scott Hood, and board member Janice Livingston. For the Finance Committee, there's the Pat Diamond, the chair, Mark Smith, the vice chair, Terry Haverhill, the clerk, and also members Matt Selby and Lou Conrad. At this time, the next order, I'd like to turn the meeting over to the town manager who will begin with the budget presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Board, members of the Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity this evening to make the initial presentation of the FY22 budget. And we'll be using a shared screen for this portion of the presentation for this part of the meeting. And I'm joined by Lisa Gabri, the Ayer Finance Manager. I'd like to thank her for all of her assistance with this, as well as the Assistant Town Manager, Carly Antonellis. Also, Mr. Chairman, I have the majority of the town departments present this evening for when we get to the Select Board and FinCom questions, and most importantly, to any public questions or public input. We have the majority of departments here to answer those questions. So I'll just give it
real quick. Is it up? I just want to make sure you can see it.
I can see it. Yep.
Looks great, Carly.
Thanks.
So just give a brief overview of this presentation for tonight. And I just want to add, as many know, we started this last year and it was very successful, and a special thanks to the Select Board and FinCom for their support, doing a public forum sort of in the beginning of the process in January, and then doing a second one in March towards the end of the process. So for tonight, we're going to do an initial look at the FY22 budget. So we'll talk briefly about the budget process, some of our successes, high-level overview of the omnibus budget, look at some of the items that are driving that budget at this time, look a little bit at wages and expenses, also look at an overview on revenue, talk about some next steps in the process. So the next slide, and many have seen this, but many have not, and for everybody's benefit, this is the budget process. The budget is a process, and think of it as an ongoing circle in a way, from formulation to implementation to audit to formulation, implementation. Where we are in the process on this slide, I've highlighted where we are in January. The process, the municipal budget cycle starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th. That's what we mean by the fiscal year. So for example, we're working on fiscal year 22, which will begin July 1st of 2021 and run through June 30th of 2022. And our process really begins in October, November of each year. And you'll see on this slide, it starts with me issuing a directive to departments for capital requests. It also begins sort of the budget process in October, November. Where we are now in January, highlighted, the operating budget has been sent in draft form to the select board and the FinCom. It's also available to the public on the town's website, and we'll talk about later where you can find that. That was submitted, the first draft, on January 8th, and that's what we'll be talking about tonight. And the Capital Planning Committee has recently finalized its recommendations. That committee worked through most of November and December. It's a committee that consists of town residents. It's chaired by Selectman Livingston this time. We have representatives from the FinCom. You can find all of the initial capital recommendations also on the town's website on the budget page. Tonight, we're on the presentation, the first presentation of the budget, and we'll get right to it. So the first item, I think it's important that we talk about Town of Ayer budget successes. And it's been said by Selectman Hood many times. I'll give him full credit, and when he was the chair of the FinCom, that a budget is really a value statement of a community. And I think it's important that we just take a brief moment to stress some of our budget successes. And I would like to professionally thank the Select Board, the FinCom, all of our department heads, boards, committees, commissions, and residents and town meeting for these successes. And many of these successes did not just happen overnight, but they're a true testament to the financial strength of the town and to the overall future of our town. So what you have here is some of the successes. We're estimating free cash to be approximately $1 million again for 2020. It's pending certification now. The last several years we've had, and we'll show a graph later, we've averaged about $1 million, sometimes over $1 million in free cash. The 2020 stabilization fund sits at $2.5 million. And for everybody's benefit, think of that as the town's savings or emergency account. It does require town meeting to access. It requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting if we had to access those funds. Below is the capital stabilization fund for 2020 is at about 1.9 million. Same again, town meeting to access that. The capital stabilization is for capital needs or capital emergencies and capital equipment as we move forward. Then you see the 2019 Standard & Poor bond rating is AA+ stable. It's practically the highest bond rating that a municipality can get. That's a true testament to the town's strong economy, strong management with good financial policies and practices, strong budgetary performance. And that bond rating is also favorable for the town's borrowing rate and our overall fiscal health as we move forward. Next slide. Some other successes, and in the interest of time, in this presentation will be provided to everybody and will also be on the budget page. But some other successes briefly, the town's OPEB, Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund, has grown to almost $2.8 million from FY15 to FY 2020. Our unused tax levy capacity is grown and is sitting at about 2.6 million. We've done solar net metering agreements, specifically a solar array that we are part of down in with the town of Paxton. Town meeting approved this back in 2013 as a recommendation from the Green Communities Committee. We've saved over $1.5 million since we've been in that agreement. Our health benefits buyout program that was started in FY 2010 has delivered about 1.3 million in savings. Our Massachusetts Clean Water Trust interest-free loans for the Spectacle Pond PFAS plant construction through the efforts of the DPW superintendent, the town treasurer, the finance manager, and for just this past year, over 587,000 in grants for public works projects, and that's a very conservative number. Next slide. We have received just over the last year over $4.2 million in economic and community development grants. Those include the Mass Works infrastructure grant on West Main Street, Park Street, streetscape planning grant in accordance with the form-based code, a COVID-19 relief grant, and many others. Our UDAG fund balance is at over 2.8 million. That's the Urban Development Action Grant, which is under the Select Board, which is intended to be used for infrastructure and economic projects. Our Community Preservation Fund balance is at about 1.9 million. And we have a very active and proactive CPC committee. The Conservation Land Trust, which was set up and authorized by town meeting a couple years ago, has $548,000 in it for the purposes of acquiring either conservation land or open space. Our forward funding of the county retirement system, which was put forth by the benefits and payroll manager, endorsed by the select board and recently passed by town meeting, is estimated to save us 1.1 million in savings in future payments over the next 2 years, including this year, so another 2. And the treasurer tax collector in FY20 has collected approximately $75,000 in tax title funds. Next slide. And I just want to say that is just a tiny sketch of all of the hard work and proactive work our town departments and our department heads have done in securing all kinds of grant funds, no matter how small or how big. It's a true testament to our town. This next slide shows sort of the history of free cash, which is certified each year, starting over on one side from the year 2000 up to 2020. And I just want to mention, we're estimated, Ms. Cabri is estimating about $1 million in certified free cash for 2020. We're just waiting for state certification. But you can see that since pretty much 2012, the town has been fortunate to have well over $1 million in free cash each year as we move forward. Again, another health barometer, I think, for the town's fiscal condition, and also an opportunity for the town to do further services and projects. Next slide. The stabilization fund I talked about earlier, the town's savings account, you can see how that has grown. This graph shows starting from 1993 all the way to the present. And you can see in the 90s, there were some very difficult years, and that's not a reflection on anyone, but it shows the challenge and how we have been able to build this town over the last several years to build up that stabilization fund, which is now sitting above 2.5 million. And again, this fund is, think of it as the savings account or the emergency account for the town. It would require a 2/3 vote by a town meeting to access those funds. And the capital stabilization fund, same thing, except it's dedicated for capital, whether that's equipment, infrastructure, if there was a significant, say, infrastructure emergency or so forth. Again, this graph shows from 2005 to the present, we have been able to continue to build that up to being just below $2 million. Next. Another tool that the town has is our reserve fund. And I wanted to talk about this briefly because This has come up in our budget plan for this year and will most likely be coming before town meeting. So the town has a reserve fund, and the reserve fund is strictly for unforeseen or extraordinary expenses. So we all know that, unfortunately, the unforeseen does happen, that when we do the budget, it would be great if everything just neatly fit into the budget and the budget cycle, but the unforeseen happens. So we have this reserve fund, which can be used for either unforeseen or some extraordinary expense. And it's important to note that those actually have fiduciary and statutory definitions. It's not just the town manager or the select board or the FinCom or a department head decides, oops, this is unforeseen or it's an emergency. The second thing is it really rests under the Finance Committee. And what that means is that in order to access the reserve fund, there's a specific form. All of the departments under the Select Board have to receive approval from both the Select Board and the Finance Committee, and those are both open meetings. Any elected commission or elected official has to receive at least FinCom approval in that. And generally, the account or the appropriation has to be almost exhausted, and it has to really fit that unforeseen and extraordinary category. So what this graph shows you from the bottom moving up is the reserve fund from 2016 to 2020. We have budgeted in the dark blue historically $150,000 for the unforeseen extraordinary, the reserve fund. And you can see in the light blue for each of those years how much we have spent of it. So for example, in 2016, we budgeted 150 and spent 134,000 or 90%. That particular year, there were several unforeseen legal matters that the town had to address. You can see, for example, this year at the top for 2020, we've only accessed about 6% to date. Now, a lot of reserve funds also requests often present themselves towards the end of the fiscal year, not always. Why I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on this is Ms. Gabri and I are recommending to the Select Board and to the Finance Committee increasing the reserve fund from 150,000 to 300,000 for FY22 due to the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. We remain in the COVID-19 situation. There's encouraging news on the horizon. That being said, there is still a lot of uncertainty and volatility at this time. We're also trying to be proactive in that, increasing this reserve, at least for FY22, would be taking into account if there's going to be unforeseen costs and so forth. It is our goal, hopefully we don't need to spend the 300,000. Hopefully we'll land more around on budget, around 150,000. But for the public's benefit, this has conceptually been presented in open session, both to the Finance Committee and the Select Board that conceptually have been supportive of this request. Again, it would be a one-time for FY22. Hopefully next year when we're doing FY23 budget, it would be great to be back to the 150,000. And again, this is only spent if it meets those criteria and goes through that process. So I wanted to just touch upon that briefly. And if there's questions later on that, be happy to come back to it. Next. Just briefly, the COVID-19 impacts to the town's budget. There's no question that this is a challenging time, and I'm pleased to report that the town's financial condition remains strong and stable. This slide here shows the CARES funding. The CARES Act was passed by the federal government back in April during the beginning of the pandemic. And what it did is it gave a certain amount of funding to each municipality on a reimbursable basis for COVID-19 related expenses. So you'll see on the top, the $719,801 is what was the town of Ayer was authorized for. You'll see the town's expenses to date has been 180,964. So these are reimbursable COVID-19 related expenses. And that's a whole process. And I want to especially thank again the finance director, Lisa Gabri, who's been the point person. She has spent an enormous amount of time pre-authorizing with the Department of Revenue if things are eligible, submitting questions, and we have to wait for approval back, and it's a slow process. So at this point, we've had 180,964 on the on the town side, and that's for overtime related to COVID-19, employee testing for COVID-19, PPE for employees, cleaning and sanitizing, and some of the accelerated telework and remote work capabilities. The next box are, if you will, the transfers through three groups that access this funding, if you will, through the town's amount. The Ayer Shirley Regional School District is about 73% of that 160,000. It's been mostly used for social distancing supplies and remote learning costs. The Neshoba Valley Technical High School is about 20%. And then the Neshoba Boards of Health, about 6%. So we have spent or been reimbursed about $341,000 of COVID-19 costs. We have a remaining eligibility balance of $378,000. Our concern is, as the pandemic continues, if this becomes depleted, then in most cases we may go to the reserve fund. Not necessarily, but that's part of the reason we're asking for that increase. Next slide. So the FY22 omnibus overview, just briefly, and it is available on the town's website, has been as of January 8th. And it's the first draft. And this is, I just want to stress, it's always a work in progress right up to town meeting, including, town meeting is the final and crucial step for approval. As we're speaking, it's under review and revision. So I wanted to just give you a brief highlight as it stands on January 27th. So at the top, the FY22 omnibus budget, so this does not include the schools, stands at 16.3 million. This is a level services budget for the most part. What I mean by level services is there are no new positions. We have pretty much leveled the departments based on what they've asked. The main driver is contractual personnel costs, which we'll talk about in a moment. You can see this number of 4.65% increase from FY21. Don't get fixated on that number because that number is going to change, and our goal is for it to change on the downward in terms of the increase. And it usually does. It usually starts on a higher end. The budget contains no new personnel positions. And at this time, some of the key budget drivers are still unknown. And that's every year. So for example, the school assessments, which we're not really going to talk about tonight, but we'll take questions on. We don't have those assessments yet, and we'll talk about later. We do have dates when we will. Health insurance. We won't have that rate until the middle of February. There are some contracts that expire on June 30th that are under negotiation, most notably the police and dispatch contract. There are some non-union personnel contracts. There are 2 department head contracts that will be expiring. And the omnibus budget does not include a cost of living adjustment at this time for non-union personnel, elected officials, and reserve firefighters. We generally do a cost of living recommendation and meeting based on metrics in February or March. I should also say that since January 8th and ongoing, we continue, Ms. Cabri and I in the departments, to review the budget, and Lisa uses the word scrub the budget, meaning make adjustments as we move forward. Next. And then again, so as of tonight, what are the major budget drivers? And I should point out, that the major drivers are the retirement assessment of 146,735. That's an estimated increase. That's the town's portion towards the pension system for employees. Health insurance, the estimated increase is 210,000. Mr. Johnston, the benefits payroll manager who handles the health insurance for the town, we will get those rates the middle of February. We've budgeted a 12% increase, and we remain very hopeful that it will come in under 12%. So, for example, this number of 210,000 is, I'd argue, on the highest side. Contractual personnel increases, both non-union and union, that have contracts, that have whether they're contractual steps or other benefits, that's a $264,000 increase. And then of these personnel increases, you'll see the majority are really, the increases are from the three public safety departments, police, fire, and DPW. But I just highlight, you'll see on the Council on Aging, there is a decrease. This number of 79,000 is actually, it's not that low. There's some additional funding that has to be put back in. And the senior center director, Ms. Swanfeld and Ms. Gabri, worked on this budget. There are a couple of personnel positions at this time because of COVID that are not funded, that they're still town positions, but they're not funded. And you'll see the fire and police estimated increases are largely contractual. And then the regional dispatch of 197,000, that increase is going to come down, which is the good news, because that's subject to 911 grant reimbursements and the Shirley assessment. And then lastly, general insurance increases. That's an estimate at 28,522. We're generally pretty accurate there. We're hopeful. It's always great if that's a little lower, which it could be. We'll get most of those insurance rates in February. Next. So you'll see the total increase of the budget right now at 4.6% is, these are the major, which equates to about $726,000. The major drivers are the contractual issues, the health insurance, again, 12% is the high end or the worst case scenario, retirement assessment, general insurance. Next. So I'd like to talk just briefly about wages and expense analysis, because all municipalities are really service providing businesses. All municipalities are in the business of providing services, police services, fire services, emergency services, social services, human services. And because of that, our largest cost is personnel. We need personnel to do these services. In many cases, we need qualified personnel, and our goal is always to attract and retain the most qualified professionals to provide these services. So if you look at the omnibus expense pie chart, the one that's on my left, it might be on your right, the one with all the blue, you'll see that 49, almost 50% of our expenses in the omnibus are wages. Another 26%, the light blue, are the employee benefits, if you will, health insurance, other benefits. And then you have debt at about 7.6%. That's our debt on various projects that we borrow for. And then you have other expenses under 16.4%, whether that's energy costs, fuel costs, other expenses. My point is that 75% of our omnibus has to do with personnel, wages, and benefits. That's not unique to Ayer, by the way. I'd argue that if you look at any, at least in Massachusetts municipality, it's a similar amount. Now, if you shift over to the other graph that has an orange slice in it, orange colored, for wages, you'll see that 61% are police and fire wages in the budget. And then you'll see public works is about 12.4%. You'll see 6.5% culture and recreation, a much smaller amount for human services. And then the orange piece, the 18%, is the general government, if you will. Just briefly on revenue overview, the revenues that the town receives, a couple of things. The revenues for tonight's presentation are a very conservative approach and a very initial approach. The town of Ayer has used a very conservative approach with revenue, and I think overall it has served us pretty well. This graph shows you the sources of revenue for the town. The biggest, which is the light blue, about 84% of our revenue is the tax levy. Specifically, about 25.6 million of the revenue is the tax levy. The next largest is the 7.4% local receipts. Local receipts, that's about 2.2 million estimated. That's all of our license fees, auto excise tax. This also includes approximately $300,000 from the retail cannabis payments that the town is receiving. Right now, and this is initial, we're looking at an initial subject, I'm sure to change, FY22 revenues at about 30.4 million. Ms. Gabri, we're assuming a 10% reduction in state aid. The good news, if you will, that orange sliver, the 1.8%, nope, excuse me, the dark blue, 2.8% is our state aid. We're fortunate Ayer is not largely reliant on state aid like a lot of other communities. That is a good thing, especially in scenarios where there could be cuts, and we're hearing all kinds of unsubstantiated information that's not encouraging on the state revenue level due to COVID-19. But you can see at 2.8%, we could absorb that. We're assuming a 10% reduction. The $300,000 payments on the cannabis, retail cannabis, is a conservative number. We're also factored in a reduction of certain licenses. The select board, to address many of our restaurants and businesses that are being impacted by COVID-19, reduced many of the license fees for the upcoming year by 75%. So that's also factored in. Next. So in terms of next steps, obviously at the top, myself and the finance manager and the department heads continue to meet to refine those budgets. And as we issue subsequent versions of the budget, so you'll find draft 1 on the website, they'll be placed there and clearly marked, draft 2 with the date. On February 5th, the Neshoba Valley Technical High School will release its budget, which will determine what our assessment will be for Neshoba Valley Tech. So that'll be one of our budget pieces on February 5th. On February 9th at 6, and it's a public joint meeting of the FinCom and Select Board, the Ayer Shirley Regional School District will present its budget, which will largely inform the school assessment. So we'll have that information on February 9th. As I mentioned, contract negotiations are underway at this time. We're scheduled to do a second presentation where we really get into some of the details and the final details, come back on March 8th. So mark your calendar at 6 for the second forum. The select board will be in March scheduling a public hearing on the water and sewer rates. I didn't touch upon that tonight, but there's a rate review committee that meets regularly on the development of the rates. In March, there'll be a public forum on a public hearing on the issue of the rates, and we'll keep everybody informed. The select board is scheduled to approve the town meeting warrant, which is sent out to all households and to voters on April 6th. And I just want to point out this year's town meeting is early as a result of a bylaw change that town meeting passed. The annual town meeting will now be on the 4th Monday of April. So this year it will be April 26th at 7 p.m. Last slide. So before I conclude, and I thank everybody for their time this evening. What I put up here is questions and further information. One of the key pieces of the whole budget process, obviously, is the public support and the public's involvement, especially at town meeting. Myself, the select board, the FinCom, we want you to have all of the information. It's public information. We want you to have the accurate information. We want to answer your questions. And it's never too soon to ask a question. You don't have to wait till town meeting. There are no dumb questions. There are no bad questions. What I put up here is just a screenshot of the town's website. If you go to the town's website under departments, click on town manager, you'll see this 2020 budget pop up, and the link is there as well. There you'll find all of the documents and information related to the budget. So right now you can get draft 1 of the budget, you can get the budget and town meeting calendar, and there's information about tonight's forum. This will continue to be populated. If you see something if there's something there that you're looking for that isn't there, please contact my office, contact Ms. Gabri. We want you to have the information and whatever information you need. Additionally, the executive buy board, with the support of the select board and FinCom, as we get closer to town meeting, we'll be doing a budget book for town meeting that will also highlight a lot of the key FY22 budget information. I know it's a lot of material. I appreciate the opportunity tonight. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions and more work to be done. So with that, I want to thank the select board and the FinCom and the public, and I'll turn it back to Selectman Copeland.
Thank you, Robert. So first, I'd like to open it up to see if there are any questions from either members of the select board or from the FinCom.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
No, Ms. Terry, I'm good too.
I have,
Mark Smith, I don't have any questions.
No questions from Pat Diamond.
All right. Since there's no questions from any of the board members, I'd like to open it up to any questions from the public. No, it doesn't seem like it. Okay, well, I guess that concludes our presentation, and we can adjourn if somebody from if FinCom wants to adjourn first.
I will accept an adjournment motion from FinCom.
I make a motion, we adjourn the FinCon.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 So moved.
I think we have to roll call. Selby says aye.
Pat Diamond says aye.
Terry Harville, aye.
Mark Smith, aye.
Lou Conrad, aye.
Okay, and then if we can adjourn from the select board.
I'll make a motion that the select board adjourn at 6:38 p.m.
I will second.
Okay, board member Livingston, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board member Hood, how do you vote?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.